Now we're live. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Stop, Record, and Play. On behalf of KG Ramnarayan, Kunal Naik, Viveick, Rajagopalan, I'm Anantha, and as Mridangamela, we're incredibly, I can't say it enough, delighted to have this bevy of authentic information and just a wealth of knowledge on the subject of copyright in audio-video recordings, live performances. We have one of the eminent voices of our generation in India, Shubha Mudgal. We have Sandhya Surendran, who's an entertainment lawyer. We have Jataneel Banerjee, who is the artistic director of the Grand Philharmonic Orchestra. And we have Aishwarya Natarajan, who runs Indianuance, an artist management company. And like the quote goes, brevity is the soul of wit. If you don't mind the introductions, we'll get right into the meat of the matter. And I'd like to start with an open question to all of you, maybe a brief response. And maybe we'll start with Shubhaji. And when is the first time that you found out about the importance of copyright in your, artistic journey?
Well, as soon after I started performing on stage, I also got an opportunity to record an album. And interestingly, I recorded the album. It was already ready and being sold when I was sent the contract to sign. And because they said they can't release the payment until I sign the contract. And
Wow.
Which year was this?
This would have been in the late 80s, maybe around 87 or so. And it sort of seemed strange to me that everything had already happened. The cassette, in those days, there were cassettes. It was already in the market. But they could not pay me till such time as I signed the contract. And of course, I went through the contract. I can read and write, so I went through the contract. But whatever it said, a lot of it made no sense to me. And I had no question. There was no opportunity to really get legal advice because it was not possible to afford it at that point. And even now, it is very difficult. So that's my first introduction to copyright and to the legalities and the contractual agreements that are often thrust on us, not prematurely, but in fact, way after we record.
Amazing. Sandhya?
Given that I'm a lawyer, I think knowing the importance of copyright was something that we learned in college in any case. But I realized that how significant it is in the current situation, because most of the musicians, like Shubhaji mentioned, don't have access to legal support, or even if they do, it's incredibly expensive. And I think that information gap is something which I realized it was information that I took for granted. And I realized how important it is for musicians and the larger corporates in the music industry, like, your labels and production houses have in-house legal teams. So that's not an issue for them at all. They know how the copyright system works and they know how to, manipulate the loopholes around it. I think that is understanding the importance of a copyright in a musician's life has probably, intensified over the last 5 years, like after I've been working with musicians.
Wow.
So, yeah.
From the UK, Mr. Jataneel.
Well, my introduction to copyright happened when I actually came to study here in the UK. So I I studied at the Royal College of Music, and we had to choose an elective. My dream was to land up in Hollywood, score some films and all of that. But equally, I realized when I was talking to all of my teachers that it's very important to understand the business side of music as well. It's very well said you are a creative, but you have to earn a living out of it. Otherwise, you will not be able to remain creative. So I took an elective on music business, and that's when I first came across copyright and all the nuances of it, essentially. So quite fortunate to be, taught by some really, really good guys here.
Lovely.
Again, which year was this, Jataneel?
It was 2006.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so about 15 years ago. Okay, Aishwarya, on behalf.
Unlike Sandhya and Jataneel, I didn't have access to information in terms of learning a studied kind of approach to copyrights. I was sort of thrown into it when I joined the industry, and the incident that really sort of shook me was when I was not with Saregama but a label before them, and I was handed 12 albums of live recordings of MS Subbulakshmi, and it was
Handed?
yes, it was like landing on a gold mine, right? Because nobody except Saregama has ever released the works of MS Subbulakshmi. And momentarily, of course, one was overjoyed. And then when it came to looking through the paperwork and understanding, how these permissions and rights had sort of just completely not transferred in the appropriate manner. And I remember poring over pages and pages of contract, and at that point I was very, very new in the industry, and I knew very little about. And to me, I think contracts was a convoluted way of saying something very simple 100 times in 100 different ways. And I thought that's just how contracts are supposed to be, and that's why they call them watertight. It was much later with experience that I realized that the simpler they are, the better they are. So of course we never ended up releasing the album for obvious reasons. And that was my first close brush with getting into some sort of a soup with copyright issues.
Right. Yeah. Well, we're going to move quickly on to basically law. And so what does Indian copyright law state with regards to kind of musicians performing traditional music? Other than sound recording rights, what are the other rights that maybe like a performing artist has? And I kind of like to direct this maybe to Sandhya to kind of kick off the legal angle, and we'll go from there maybe.
Sure. So I think the concept of performers' rights, I think, was introduced maybe in like the late 50s in the Copyright Act. They didn't really exist as such, and they didn't really have any right in terms of copyright on the song. It was usually, and it still is, the composer and the lyricist who has a copyright in terms of like ownership of the song itself, though a singer or a performer, so to speak, in terms of music, adds significant value to the composition as well. So acknowledging a performer and giving a separate right happened in the late 50s, but that was still in terms of moral rights, where you could acknowledge that you are the performer of that in that particular song and enforce that right. But there were no economic rights attached to it. So it is only I think by 2012, the 2012 amendment was very relevant to that whole development, because that gave a performer the ability to enforce economic rights in terms of like having a stake in royalty to that song or to the performance of that particular composition. So which is how ISRA came into place. And ISRA is a copyright society dedicated to singers specifically. So when you say that you have a performer's right in a particular song or a piece of work, it is that you have the right to record your live performance. You have a right to reproduce that recording. So basically make copies of it and distribute it, and broadcast that particular performance as well. So what typically happens is that, unlike a copyright owned by a composer or a lyricist on a piece of work, the term of a performer's rights is limited. It's like limited to 25 years. And it's related so it's related to that specific performance which they have given. So if you're a member, or if, for that matter, if you're a performer of an original song which has come out and you want to perform that at your concert, then as per law, you don't need to take permission for it because you have that right. And but the complication comes when you have labels who own the performance also claiming a stake in it, and therefore you have to take permission. The organizers need to take permission from the labels to conduct that concert. So it's not just the performer alone that has a stake in it, of course. So the person who owns the sound recording and the composition obviously have the higher copyright. So that way, a performer's rights is secondary to the original copyright, but it is still something which can be enforced, and that's happened in the last 8 years.
Right. Is the law any different in the UK in terms of how this works?
See, look, disclaimer, I obviously haven't studied law, but I can tell you it's way more simpler here. Literally very, very simple. So regardless you are the original singer in the original version of the song or not, I don't think any label actually comes and creates any kind of claim on a live performance that a singer is performing. So you may be an established singer, you may be a singer who is starting off, you're singing covers, really doesn't matter. The system over here is the sound recording comprises of two elements. One is the rights holders elements, which is the label who has actually put the money into kind of creating the sound recording. And then there are audible contributions. So there are musicians, performers who would contribute audibly into that sound recording. So both of them have rights to receive revenue. So as a rights holder, when any sound recording has public performance, means it is broadcasted on TV or broadcasted on radio, there is a certain amount of money that gets generated because of the licensing agreement between broadcaster and a society like PPL, which is Phonographic Performance Limited. So when money comes into PPL, that money gets divided 50-50 between the rights holder and the performers. Okay, and then the rights holder gets paid their chunk, and the performers gets paid their chunk for the public performance. Okay, there are no specific establishment to kind of for reproduction of that sound recording. That is completely held with the record label. Now, performers will also have some arrangement with the record label for any residual income that they would receive because of sales, because of downloads, because of whatever it is. So that accounting is done by the label to the performer.
Okay.
So that's how it works over here, and it's very simple. If you are a part of a recording, you would receive your royalty, provided you are a member of a society like PPL.
Okay.
Jataneel, just a quick question on that, just to sort of maybe draw attention to the difference over there. Are you saying that whether there is if there are X number of people who are part of a recording, are you saying like how Sandhya mentioned that the people who play with the main artist, right? They are secondary musicians. Are you saying there's no such segregation there?
There is a segregation in terms of what percentages are allocated depending upon your contribution. So there will be a featured artist. Let's say, for example, Shubhaji is singing the song, so she's the featured artist, and all the other musicians who are accompanying her or maybe has contributed alongside are called non-featured artists because they are not actually featured essentially. Okay, so the segregation, what happens? So when I said the 50% goes to the rights holder, which is the label, and 50% to the performer's chunk is then further divided between the featured artist and the non-featured artist. And the segregation.
Are you saying composer, featured artist, and or straight away?
Not composer. No. So on the sound recording, composers or lyricists doesn't have any stake in there, unless they are also contributing something audibly. The key thing is audible contribution. Basically.
Interesting.
So the featured artist will get 65% of the 50%.
Right.
Does it make sense?
Okay.
Yeah. And rest of the 35% is distributed amongst the non-featured artists. Now, in case of an orchestra, it's flipped. In case of an orchestra, it's flipped because the orchestra has so many people performing in an orchestra. So 65% of the 50% is allocated for the orchestra, and then 35% is for the featured artist. If somebody is a singer, or say, for example, a pianist, or anybody who is kind of actually performing the main kind of part of the performance.
Cool.
So, Jataneel, did you say?
I just wanted to chip in.
Sorry.
I'm so sorry, Aishwarya.
Go on,
I
go
just
on.
wanted to chip in here because I mean that's really interesting because the whole discussion around performers' rights in India has always focused on what. So technically, a musician is defined like a performer includes a musician, a juggler, an
Yes.
acrobat, even a snake charmer.
Even
Those are
people
the actual
presenting
definitions in the
anything on
Copyright
the
Act.
board also is a
So
performer. Yeah.
yeah. And so technically based on that definition, even a sessions artist is a
Yeah.
performer on a particular piece of work. But a sessions artist in India doesn't get that royalty or the same kind of recognition that a singer actually has today, because there is no copyright society. And I guess
Right.
because of that lack of unity, it's just taken as a work for hire, and they're made to like sign off on NOCs. So technically, even the courts have held it that it's not work for hire because it's still like addition to. So but so that's like a significant difference from how it operates in the UK and the US.
Every musician, whoever, whether it's a singer or it's an instrumental player, everybody has the same rights.
Now, I'd like to just turn the attention, if you don't mind, to Shubhaji and ask her this inaudible contribution. Now, when it comes to traditional music, there are a wealth of compositions that are, many hundreds of years old. And technically, the audible contribution is the people performing on stage. So what do you have to, what do you think about that? Like, do you think the contribution is still, the traditional element of what it is that's handed down as a composition, or it's something which is different?
Well, I think acknowledgement is a must in my opinion. I don't know what the law really says about acknowledging something that is traditional. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think the law has defined what is actually traditional. Is it something that is 100 years old or 150 years old? So there is this ambiguity about how to understand and how to term any composition traditional. But since I've been learning and I've been studying a form of music which is interpretative, and where the composition actually really provides a seed idea, it's really, in a sense, it's a compositional seed with which you really grow through your virtuosity and your training and your understanding of that system. I think if there was no seed idea, what would you elaborate upon, So I think the importance of the composition is certainly there. And in the Hindustani classical music tradition, the manner in which we were taught to acknowledge was that when you take the name, and you must have all witnessed this at some point or the other, that when you are performing on stage, and you say that I'm singing the composition of so and so composer, let us say Daraspia, or a more recent composer, for example, a great Vidwan who has composed something more recently, let us say Pandit Jitendra Bhisheki, then the system was to acknowledge them both by saying so that I'm grateful I received this composition from the person who taught it to you. And also very often you'll see people making a gesture, like either touching their heart or their ear, just as a manner of, in a sense, acknowledging the fact that here was a great person who composed this composition, which I am fortunate enough to now interpret. So this is the way acknowledgement was taught to us. Unfortunately, at that point of time, the mad world of the business of music didn't exist in this way. And so now I think it's becoming a big problem about how to identify what is traditional. And I've had several occasions where I have composed, let's say, a dadra or a khayal and sung it somewhere. Very often I have come across younger musicians or even others, who are playing that composition and saying this lovely traditional dadra. Well, this lovely traditional dadra was composed in 2019 or even in February 2020. So, on the one hand, it gives me great pleasure to think that this is coming into that sort of hallowed category of traditional compositions. But at the same time, it would be nice, for them to say that this was, where did you get it from? If I've composed it recently, I'm the only one to have sung it. So the least you can say is that, look, I haven't learned it from anybody. I've just taken it off Guru YouTube now. So, these acknowledgements I feel are very important in an ethical sense. And then, of course, whatever else follows is still very ambiguous about traditional music, and it hasn't been discussed really threadbare.
Can I
I'd
ask
like you to go ahead.
just a quick one, Shubhaji? When say, for example, when you have composed and you have recorded and released your song, does it
Yes.
clearly mentions that it is your composition?
Yes.
Okay. Then that's
Yeah. I mean, I
This
usually
is very
I've been-
common, Jataneel. I've had friends send me videos saying, listening to your stuff. Nobody's bothered to mention your name over there. So that's very common.
right.
No, I'm also wondering if this is particularly in the case of music like classical music and folk music, because one just presumes that this is an ancient form of music, and anything ancient must be traditional. Anything that is ancient
Stylistically.
must be, yeah, exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
of course. Must be in the public domain. So, which is quite interesting. I think that presumption with which people approach this music deters them from even trying to find out if there are people who need to be, even if it is in the public domain, like Shubhaji said, it is nice to acknowledge whose works you're performing. And even more so if it is someone who is more recent and you have learned it from them, or you happen to do a representation of that song. At the very least, an acknowledgement is there. But I think it might stem from this problem that classical and folk music is assumed to, everything is assumed to be traditional and the public domain.
Yeah, there is a genre in UK where it's quite like Mumford and Sons, one of the biggest known bands. They perform folk style music, so you can classify their music as folk music, but it's actually not in public domain. It's stylistically folk music,
right?
So I think that's the word folk, the word traditional, or the word classical has this kind of connotation, notion in people's mind that it is, nobody knows where it has come from actually.
Well, there are those situations where compositions is not a single person's intellectual kind of thing, right? Like there's, I think Shubhaji was, referring to something like that once, where you're saying it comes from a village or something like that. And
yeah, I think you were talking about
who do you create? Like, who do you credit?
Group, when it's a family of people, like then how do you sort of address it to? So this is specifically to. I'm just telling the audience who's listening also. By the way, guys, sorry, I'll just take a second. Please post your questions here. It'll be nice to know that you're listening to us also. So this is to do with the Mangnar community. So when it's a community-based thing, and every father, brother, son is a musician, how do you sort of attribute the composer or the author?
I'd like to chip in over here. The thing is, so I'm sure the same logic applies to Hindustani as well, in terms of how it originated, like the raga, the tala, and how there were a few distinct authors back in the 15th century or 16th century, whenever this originated. And it has evolved over a period of time. And like Shubhaji mentioned, it is that idea or that particular raga which is used in a song is like an idea, and each singer or each performer has expressed it in a very distinct way. So you will see performances today where, like Shubhaji mentioned, as soon as they start singing, they'll say, okay, I am performing this version composed by this particular singer. And they say composed by that singer because the singer has come out with a different rendition of it. So if you're looking at it technically from a legal perspective, there is copyright that is created in that. So when you're recording that performance, there is a separate copyright that is created in that as well. When it comes to folk music, it's almost if I'm thinking about the Kerala folk songs, Aviyal's entire album was based on folk music, and all of it dates back to the 17th century. So there's nobody who really owns the composition as such. It's in public domain, but Aviyal's rendition of it, or the arrangement which they have come up with, is copyrightable, and it has protection over it. And obviously the sound recording has its own. So if you're applying the same logic to traditional what we understand traditional music as, since it's not defined in law. If you're dating it to be music that is in public domain in terms of compositions that have existed for like centuries together and have had variations to it, there is a copyright that's created with every new version that's created. And the trouble comes up when you have labels who have copyrighted it, and then they have that copyright period, and then they reset that term by releasing re-recorded versions of the same music. So
just to sort of clear that, when you're saying it's copyrightable, are you saying that Avial gets the authorship and it's not just merely sound recording rights?
No. So because that arrangement is unique, and there is an additional copyright that's added.
Yeah, but I could make another arrangement of the same song.
That's fine.
And you're not your copyright.
Yeah, and that'll be your copyright. So because, and I'm like, for example, the song Chekkele has so many different versions. It's not like anyone owns the composition as such, but their version of the composition is copyrightable. And they own, in the sense, they do own rights on it. And apart from the sound recording, like I mentioned.
Wow, I didn't know that. It's interesting. So you think this is the same for, improvised music also? Do you think the same kind of stipulation should be applied? What do you think? I see
I'm not so
previously.
sure it would apply. Would you?
Yeah, I was going to start with Shubhaji. Go ahead. Either one. That's fine.
I mean, I'll give you the example of a very well-known composition, Rangi Sari Gulabi Chunariya. Now, this was recorded by Srimati Shobha Kurtu several decades ago, and I think that is the only earlier recording of this composition that I've heard. If there exists something else, I mean, maybe there is a 78 RPM or something which somebody may have recorded, but I haven't come across it. But my earliest memory of this recording is Shobha Gurtuji's recording. Today, everyone is performing this composition. And even people, so of course her disciples would perform it because she would have taught it to them. And very often it is a matter of pride to say that, my guru taught this to me and I'm now presenting this. This was a very popular composition that she recorded. I don't even know the authorship of the composition. Who wrote the lyrics? Who made the melody? I don't know. I only know that the first time I heard it was from Srimati Shobha Gurtu. But today, people who are so young that they could not have learned from her, because she had already passed away. So where did they learn it from? And they are not students of her disciples. Now, in that sense, I feel we must encourage young students not to feel fearful of acknowledgement. Although, of course, acknowledging could get them into trouble then. But I feel that it must be encouraged by the teachers themselves. That, look, if you're singing something, even if it's a folk song, where did you get it from? I very often sing folk songs and I say, I got this one. My grandmother taught it to my mother and my mother taught it to me. Or there was so-and-so person in my hometown who taught it to me. What is the problem in acknowledging that? I feel that must be encouraged with traditional music, because that becomes a document, that becomes part of some researcher, scholar, some student is going to trace the DNA of that song and do a forensic investigation into how this song came to be, how it has traveled across so many generations. I think
the Carnatic musician saints did a good job with that, because they always lyrically made their own, would write their own name when they do something.
In Hindustani music also, the chap or the pain is there in a lot of compositions. Right. But very often we don't know who that is. And also people have followed a kind of template. So let's say Sadarang, Adarang, and my guru's pen name was Ramrang. So everybody assumes that, okay, Sadarang was in the ancient past, Ramrang is also in the ancient past.
Yeah. But the one thing I wanted to add here is when you're rendering a classical composition. So, and I'll speak about a style that I'm a little bit more familiar with. Let's say it's a Carnatic music composition. So they'll say you are following a certain school of singing. So there is a composition, and however it has passed on over generations, oral tradition, of course, and then much later has been notated. There will be what we call sangatis, right? So there are variations in the way you sing a certain line. And there's a certain structure to that already, which is how you learn it. So the famous Vatapi Ganapatim, which most people are familiar with. So there are like 5 4 or 5 sangatis of how you would repeat the first line. Now, my question to Sandhya is, when you talk about improvisations, if I decide that I don't want to do those 4 or 5 variations, but I'm sticking within the realm of the raga, but I am using my creativity and improvisation as a musician, and I'm delivering a completely different version, but very much still within this main structure of the song. What we call in that case, we just call it improvisation, right? So for us, that doesn't fall under any sort of, that is my composition or I own rights to that, unless of course I have rendered it a particular way, it has been recorded and has been published and sold. Then that particular instance of how it has been recorded, that copyright I understand. But I don't think from a compositional standpoint that would make any difference, or does it?
No. So like you mentioned, I think what is important is the fact that it has to be recorded and distributed. If it is just a live performance that you're rendering at that particular point of time, and if that live performance was recorded, the composition which has been rendered, that arrangement is something that you have copyright on. Yeah. But it's not like if I heard you performing a version at a concert that I attended, and it's not recorded anywhere, but I remembered how it was arranged, and I went and I recreated it. I'm not really infringing your copyright there.
Right. Yeah. That answers my question.
Also, to answer Shubhaji's what we were talking about, the traditional folk music and tracing their roots. There is an organization called Anahad that is actually working with folk musicians across the west of India, so Gujarat and Rajasthan, and helping them track royalties and actually registering them so that whoever's engaging them as musicians for their work and giving them credit, whether it's coming from a particular gharana or from a group or from a tribe, acknowledging the origin of it. So I just thought it might be useful to mention that here.
I have a question actually for Viveick. And it's kind of because you're on the other side also, besides being a moderator, as someone who has, a little experience in this. How do you think it should be? We go about it for something like rhythm, where it's very tough to say that there is this mudra or this chop or something like that. Because it's a little bit different than using words per se. And I think you've done some work on it. And do you think that works, or what do you think?
Yeah, I personally have done royalty arrangements with works that I've done as well. Because I wanted to also set a precedent with people in India, saying that it is possible. Just like Jataneel said, that it's not really about the percentage, but it's the fact that as a performer, you do contribute, even if you're a percussion player, right? The fact is that you are adding something to that piece of music. So I think there's absolutely no harm. And I mean, the thing is, in many situations, what happens is people actually don't even have a fee to pay, right? In fact, so in most of my collaborations, I actually offer them a royalty, which is maybe more than what they would have got if I was paying them a fee, to sort of keep that collaborative intent, So the idea, I think principally all this should come from the intent perspective. What is the intent behind it? Are you, has somebody given me a written piece of music to say XYZ? No, I'm actually putting my mind to it and performing to that piece of music. In fact, in that sense, I would say, I'm not even, it's like, when you ask a singer to sing, they're actually singing somebody else's composition with some nuances. I mean, this I'm talking in the film music or domain, but when they call a percussionist, 90% of the time, they don't know what they want them to play. They're asking them to actually arrange something, Right. So that's where I think it becomes even more meritorious to sort of to actually demand a small royalty share.
There's this funny thing I came to know when I was studying this subject. So not long ago, you would know that music producers play a very key role, or also sound engineers play a very key role in shaping the sound of the song. Okay, if we take song as an example, And what was happening was, the reason why a song was able to do a kind of a business that they do is because of the vision of the music producer. They would clearly, indicate what they really want, and then how it should sound, how they would capture the sound. But unfortunately, there was no royalty arrangement to kind of, do something which kind of shapes the song, but it is not audible. Okay, so up until recently, the music producer will either clap on the song, or they'll play some triangle or something like that to make sure that there is, a bit of a
more cowbell
contribution. However, now PPL has a provision where a music producer can also get non-featured performers royalty because of a non-audible contribution, but being a music producer.
Oh, wow.
So
soon the audience is going to start asking for this stuff.
Yeah, I think we should just maybe take one or two of these questions. So Lakshmi Anand had this question where she's saying if different versions can be copyrighted, potentially people could copy a version and say there are slight differences, which there will be. How different should a version be to make it copyrightable?
And this is a gray area. It is completely a gray area, because who's deciding what is the difference, right? It's just about it's going back into the basics of copyright. So it all depends on the copyright holder. If I'm the copyright holder of that new version, and the person has taken my version, maybe added a few elements on top of it, and then kind of published it or distributing it for either on YouTube or anything. If I get
if you take
YouTube right now.
If you take the example of Avial, if somebody literally takes the same BPM, same guitar tone, and then same pitch, and then just modulates a little bit, we can fairly say that there's an intent to copy, for sure.
Exactly. So but again, the intention to copy is going to be determined only if Avial enforces their copyright on this.
Sure.
I can't, as a third party, say that, okay, you guys, you have stolen from Avial, so I'm going to get them, I'm going to file a case against you. It's at the instance of the copyright holder in any case. So a lot of people are not going to pursue that.
Can I add something in this one?
Sure.
I think we have to be very clear in our mind what we are talking about, whether it is the underlying copyright we are talking about, which is the composition and the words, or it's sound recording. Okay, so all six of us can sing the same song, exactly the same, but we'll have copyright of the sound recording for each of us, but not the underlying copyright. So I think if you are making versions of one song, multiple versions, each version's sound recording will have its unique copyright, but not the actual underlying work. The underlying work will still retain with whoever is the copyright owner of it.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know what underlying works is, it's basically there's an arrangement that goes behind a composition, which is also of course part of the entire thing. If I'm right, Jataneel, that's what underlying works is.
Actually, underlying works is the composition and the lyrics itself.
And composition.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So the melody and the lyrics.
Melody and the lyrics. Sorry, the other way.
Yeah.
Then
so technically, it's the onus is
on
on every artist to copyright technically every concert, every recording, because it's all going to be slightly different. And so then how many are you going to hold for the same song?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Kaushik, she has a question for all of us, which is, what if the same words are sung in different ragas?
Well, that's interesting. It's like asking.
Yeah. So the rag will
same
be
lyrics,
right? So,
sung in different tunes,
different
right?
compositions.
That's pretty much what you're saying. Yeah.
Jataneel, you want to go first?
That would be a variation of it.
Shubhaji?
Go ahead. We'll go with Jataneel and then we'll go one by one. Yeah.
Please, Shubhaji, go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
I think in Hindustani music, a lot of the lyrics have been borrowed from literature which is in the public domain, let's say Surdas or other poets from the Bhakti era, in which case there is no one person who holds the rights for the lyrics, and therefore it is absolutely fine to sing them in different rags. I think only the melodic composition and the rhythmic composition would then be, there would be the possibility
Your
to
copyright.
copyright.
Yeah,
Yes,
the authorship
but
would be in the
you're already
composition.
borrowing. And this happens. This has happened again and again, that composers in the past have already looked at classical literature and borrowed extracts. In fact, they've even made an edit. So it could be a much bigger pada, of which 2 lines have been extracted by the composer and made into a vilambit or drut khayal. In which case, there is possibly that person also has the right for the edit and the adaptation. But of course, nobody has exercised that right. However, if it's already lyrics in public domain, I don't think it is a problem. If there are lyrics that are written by somebody and registered, then of course, whichever rag you wish to sing them in, you would still need to acknowledge and also take permission, and then all the rights would also kick in.
So it will be the original. You will become the copyright owner of that track.
For the authorship of the composition, you will be the copyright.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And the sound recording also.
Yes.
Yeah, technically each time it is a new sound recording. So
however,
you
if
would
you
own
have
that anyway.
rendered it in a particular raga and then someone else renders it the exact same way you have, then of course, then again the same thing kicks in, right? Because then you have to take permission from the person who composed the works in the first place.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have another question from the audience, or are you gonna?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Remember? Okay, cool. So I had a kind of a simulated question to ask, and it's probably addressing some of these social hierarchies that are also part of this musical system. And it's something like, and it happens many times, and you have somebody who is a young artist who is getting an opportunity to perform with a very respected musician. Where is kind of the line of protection of sorts for somebody to say, I want to know about these things. I want to know what is my right, what is my due of sorts, without having that overbearing threat of saying, okay, opportunities are going to be taken away from me, and probably having a little bit of that intimidation. And is there any protection on the artist's side to actually say this in a way that seems fair? And I want to know what you all think about that.
So
well, over here, it is a common practice, pretty much. I think in this part of the world, I think people are generally a bit more aware, so they don't find it any difficulty in actually discussing share percentages and any of those kind of things, or even say for example, if I am putting something unique, say for example, if I created the hook in a song, or if I have created the actual memorable part of the song, which is attracting the people, then I can negotiate a better percentage for myself, even if it is very short. But I think it's awareness which is the most important part. So whether it's an established artist or accompanying artist or artists who are working together as an ensemble or whatever, I think this is what my feeling is like. If you don't know, you don't.
Fine line between being a buzzkill and
but you can be respectful and ask things. That's not at all a problem. I
think it's very, very rampant in the classical fraternity that a main artist will first of all, I know there are a lot of objections to even calling them that there's a main artist and accompanying artist, but the main artist will take a very good accompanying artist with him on tour or for a performance, and a fee is negotiated for the performance. I don't know from a legal standpoint if the accompanying artist has any recourse legally, but I would say that yes, it comes with this. I have been given a break and I'm getting to perform with this great legend, and maybe it'll open more doors for me, and maybe I'll have a tour of my own later, who knows. But I think at the very least, to be cognizant that you're only being paid for a performance, you're not being paid for anything else. So even if it means that you check with the artist if they're entering into any agreement with the organization or the promoter who's engaging them for their services, whether this is going to be exploited commercially in any other form. I think even having that information at a later point when it comes to fruition, there may be a case to be made, and you can say that, look, I was only compensated for the live performance, but here you're recording it and releasing it as an album, and that is very, very often overlooked. And at the very least, get an NOC. The onus is on the artists to protect the rights of all fellow musicians. And for some fellow musicians who might find it very, very difficult to have this conversation with very senior artists, my only suggestion would be to try and find out if there are any contractual arrangements in place. And I know the word contract alone scares a lot of people. But even if it's a simple letter to say that, hey, can you come back to me if this is going to be commercially exploited? So then I know which way it's going.
Yes, Shubhaji.
So I'd like to say that nothing in the talim or the traditional training of a Hindustani classical musician prepares them for the world that we are discussing today. Nothing. You are taught compositions, you are taught elaboration, improvisation, you are taught tans, paltas, but nothing about this entire world of royalties, permissions, contracts. There is no such
We should
thing.
do a Jugalbandi, Shubhaji. Because from the Hindustani side, you've been doing this. I've been doing this from the Carnatic musician side. Everybody teaches you Adi Talam, Mr. Talam, but nobody tells you how to make an invoice.
No, so nothing. So I feel that it is in the need of the hour is also to prepare younger students and younger artists, to give them the opportunity to learn about this. I think also, I'm constantly, I've had really, really terrible experiences, as must everyone else, and at the same time, I don't want to be a person, an artist who's only bothered about contracts and agreements to the detriment of making music. I would like very much for I don't want to be, when I'm thinking of a composition, I don't want to start thinking even before the composition is performed, what if somebody steals it from me, So I really think we have to, we have to be careful about knowing what we want to do and then deciding how much we want to give away. The hierarchies are unfortunately very much in place, and the hierarchies are of all kinds. When as a performer, even today, if I were to say, I'm saying today because very often younger musicians tell me, oh, it's easy for you to say all these things, it's not, we are not in the same situation. Well, across your performing life, the moment you say, okay, you would like to invite me for a concert, these are the terms, and you say, can you put them down even on an email, you will get a lot of hostility.
Resistance.
Right.
Yes, even hostility. And some people will say, oh, Pandit Ravi Shankar performed for us. He never asked us for a contract. Who the hell are you? So yes, all of that will happen. And yet we have to decide each one for ourselves. And whether it's the main artist or whether it is an event organizer. And also please remember that very often the people who are exploiting could actually be people who are very, very powerful and also highly revered. Some of the biggest exploitations come from the most celebrated, awarded artists in this country who have not bothered to pay any part of their fee to their accompanying artists. Also, there are younger artists who decide, let's just do what we like. And unfortunately, we can't become a litigious community. But we need to know that this is a right and whether or not to exercise it. We have to acknowledge that there are hierarchies, there is exploitation, and it could come from anybody, even the most revered artist. And
I think it should just become like how we wear a mask these days as a part of hygiene. That it should become that all these things are done just as hygiene, There are no questions asked.
You use the word hygiene, Viveick, because as Shubhaji was speaking, I was just reminded of an instance where I was representing a very well-known folk artist, a Rajasthani folk artist. And there was a recording contract that had taken place. And what would you think? Rajasthani folk tune, he sang one line. Here in India, you would have said, of course, folk tune hai, whatever. He's a singer, pay him money and be done with it. Because it was an international organization, because they didn't have these filters. right? They did not make assumptions. Like Viveick is saying, it was very hygiene for them to ask, did you compose this? And he had in fact composed it. It was one line. And then they shared it, 1/3 publishing royalty. He was surprised, he hadn't heard of anything like that before. So sometimes I feel half-baked, no knowledge is better than no knowledge is better than half-baked knowledge, because at least you will make sure that you go by the rule book and get everything right.
Yeah. So just to sort of, bring, since there are, I think a lot of people are asking this question, maybe we should just address it head on now, which is the audiovisual recording that is happening these days, even earlier, of our live concerts. This has been happening from, and we feel extremely happy, most artists, when they're getting video recorded. That's the first level of excitement. But then when 2 years later, when you see that recording being aired somewhere else and someone's making money out of it, and he drives out of his BMW, that's when you're wondering, like, who just did that, So I think it's very important these days, especially because I've personally answered this question many times to people about, how they need to at least look into what they're signing, or even if they're not signing, what is it that they're doing? So I'd like, to actually first start with Shubhaji, since you've been the most experienced in this thing. When did you first start, let's say, looking at an audio-visual contract? So because we've discussed the copyright part, we've discussed all that, but now it's your performance. So when did you first say, you need my permission plus money to record and broadcast?
I actually learnt the bitter way through terrible experiences, and also from an experience where I was taken to court for singing my own composition, a composition for which, yes, but unfortunately, I won't give the names only because the terms of the settlement demand that we do not mention that. However, extremely esteemed artist asked me to compose for a production, then chose to, so the first concert for the first performances had my names on billboards, I was on stage receiving flowers, etc., etc. The next concert said it wasn't my composition at all. So as you can see, there was an untruth told at least on one of those occasions, either the earlier one or the one later. So, and that got into a big court case. And it was settled finally on the terms that I would be acknowledged as I was in the first run of those performances. That's what happened to that. But I learned from this that it doesn't matter if you are asking for the rights. You could be taken to court actually for singing your own composition as well. So, and because people may appropriate it and say, no, you don't have a contract. You don't have a proper document to say that you are singing it for a particular purpose and that the rights remain with you. So if the person is more powerful than you, they can take you to court. Yeah, so I think I unfortunately learned from some bitter experiences, which I would not wish on any of my fellow artists. But I did learn. So that's when I started. It was quite early on that I became one of those difficult artists who asks for contracts.
Oh yeah, of course. Aishwarya, what's your experience like? What do you sort of put down in your contract when it comes to the specifics of, let's say somebody's paying you XYZ fee for the concert. What are the things that I'm sure there are many who are listening to this, sort of, let's say, again, a hygiene of the bullet points that you might look into?
Well, from the audiovisual perspective, if they say that we want to do a video recording, I only permit excerpts of a certain duration that can be used for promotion, where they want to make a montage of the various performances that they've held as an organization for whatever, any kind of promotional, non-commercial purpose, excerpts of a certain duration. And I also insist that they are from different compositions and not one long excerpt from one portion of the song. Otherwise, unless they themselves bring it up, I usually just don't even, it never finds mention in the contract when it comes from us. My pet peeve, of course, is something when they say for archival purposes. Any organization who invites you, pays you, whether they're paying you 50,000, they're paying you 5 lakhs, they will say, we want to record this for archival purposes. My answer is, why are you archiving? Archive would mean this for some purpose of research or study. What research or study are you doing? And if you say research and study, it means it has to be available to the public. So I do not, and I urge physicians, because it's become such a commonplace term, archival. हाँ, उनका मतलब है कि वो commercially नहीं exploit करेंगे. You know, they just feel happy that they're not stealing from us. They're recording it and they're keeping it somewhere. The point is, in the event that someone has an ill intent to actually go ahead and exploit your recording, it's going to be very hard for you to track them down.
So since you're saying archiving, these days they just archive it in their YouTube channel. So what do you do about that?
Sorry, say that again?
These days they just go and archive it in their YouTube channel.
I don't know.
I don't think there is archiving. The moment anything is out for broadcast is not archiving, actually.
That's what they say, you know. No, I'm just keeping it in my YouTube channel. It's like keeping
No, but the entire National Audio Visual Archive, which has been set up recently and is on a special website, it claims to be an ISO certified archive, does not have permissions from performers in the larger part of it doesn't have permission from performers. My own recordings are there. I know that Anish's recordings are there. No permission has been taken from us. We didn't even know that those concerts were recorded. And also we have the right to say that this concert I don't want to share. Perhaps it was a day when I wasn't performing too well. I should have the right to say that, shouldn't I? And yet it's all out. Not only is it out there, but you're right, Viveick, that people are downloading those videos from the archive and putting them on YouTube channels. So the next thing is that it's going to be monetized on YouTube. In fact,
Absolutely.
I think Kaushiki has asked this question about organizers recording and putting it on YouTube and monetizing it, and can something be done? So if any of you want to answer that.
Yeah, I think Sandhya, you should specifically take that, and even Jataneel, you should take that as well, since you also work with YouTube and Facebook. You know, the tricky part is that, you know, to record a live venue thing is something else. But post-COVID, there has been this situation where everyone's getting, you know, a certain fee or sometimes no fee to record their concert, because, you know, artists just like being given a platform. So, you know, you are you send out a video like a 45-minute thing or a 1-hour clip or 1.5-hour clip, and that's on XYZ YouTube page or Facebook page. Now, I'm not going to get into what the negotiations between whether they're going to do it for free, but isn't the artist supposed to be aware of there is a sound recording that's going into there is a video that's going there? I actually asked someone that, what if I just cut this 5 minutes and I use it in a jingle? What are you going to do? You know, so this is something which I want the legal side also to look into. And Jataneel, you also tell me how this works in, you know, on your side of Western classical music.
One thing I just want to quickly add, just a bit of comic relief. And when do you think it's good to tell artists that the allure of saying your YouTube concert is going to be watched by 39 countries is going to become quickly jaded? It's more than money. The world is watching you.
Yeah, exactly.
They fall for it very often.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, please.
Yeah, like I think like what Viveick mentioned, especially post-COVID, everyone's a lot more aware of the fact that, okay, this is going to be the only source of income in terms of, I mean, we don't know for the foreseeable future. And if your organizer, so like for example, I've drafted contracts for artists who are performing either for a private event or for, it could be something which is live streamed and free as well. But if that is being recorded, then there are certain ownership rights that need to be discussed. Like the artist can retain rights on the recording because as a performer, he or she is entitled to it under law. if the organizer is paying for it and saying that he or she would want to retain ownership of the performance, then there is a certain fee that has to be paid for it, and there is a scope of what they can use it for. Are they going to extract the audio from it and use it for something else, like you mentioned? That is also a breach of copyright. So all of these things are things that can be negotiated and should be put in the contract, because that is allowed to you as per law. So but I think, like you mentioned, a lot of artists, especially the young and upcoming ones, agree to free performances, free live streams for it could be on a very popular YouTube channel, and they're not aware of the fact that that video is actually generating a lot of income for the people who are uploading it. So I think these are the things that you should keep in mind when you're agreeing to do something online or performing online, either as a composer or as an artist.
Yeah.
And if you're doing a show on Facebook or any other organization's page, please have them take it off, especially if it's a paid performance. You were paid,
absolutely.
people logged in at a certain time to come watch your play live, and either it was ticketed or the sponsor or the organization paid you for it, and then it just sits there on the platform for weeks for anyone who chances upon it to watch. So please insist that it's taken off.
Yeah, I think Aniji is pointing out that even performers' rights of soloists and accompanists. Yes, of course. I think 90% of the time it's the main artist. I almost get uncomfortable saying this main artist business. But anyways, so the main artist, it's
MEIN in Hindi, no?
They call it as a feature.
Stop my Hindi.
Just leave it there, Anantha. So yes, the accompanying artists, the tabla player, mridangam player, sarangi player, whoever is part of the ensemble, they have equal rights to say, I don't want this to go anywhere else, or I want more money for any of this. So we will come to that part of how you can amicably do all these things.
Right.
Please don't get this as a session where we're going to be, coming up with red flags tomorrow. There is a amicable way to do these things, and we will definitely discuss that as well. Jataneel, what's your take on this?
So what I do, because in an orchestra we have so many people, and we get asked to perform in really big events.
Joint family. Orchestra is like a joint family.
Too many joint families, actually. The last one was 75 people. It was too big. So what I normally do is, whenever I am asked to kind of put together a show, I make sure that I know exactly what is going to be happening with that show. And, 10 out of 10 times, they all wanted to be, recorded, both audio and video. Okay? Because they spend so much money, they want to monetize it. We understand that. So my next thing would be to then select or, go to our musicians and say, look, this is the situation, and this is how much they have agreed to. So I have to negotiate an extra fee for doing this. So if they say archival, there's a separate fee for it. And if they're saying that we are going to be, selling it to a broadcaster, we want to try and make more money out of it. I have been fortunate. They have been very upfront and straight, probably because of the scale of concerts. So I would negotiate an extra fee for doing that, so that all the musicians can give a go ahead with it. And then I would come to our musicians and explain exactly what the situation is going to be. It is going to be recorded. It is going to be, all of that. We even have rehearsals recorded because they want to create a documentary out of it or whatsoever, So all of it is agreed, written on a piece of paper. Sometimes musicians have problem. So then we have to sometimes say that this is how it's going to be. If you have problem with the fee, we understand. Probably we'll go for an alternative musician. Because we also have to make sure that we are able to cooperate with the organizers, So it's a kind of a back and forth.
Just send them to India; they'll agree for everything.
No, but I think it's a very common practice over here, because when you are doing gigs in a very large scale, you would record it and try to monetize it. But then every musician gets compensated, and it is part of the musicians union rule. We have to follow that. We cannot. It will be a breach of law in this country. But the fees can be negotiated. There is a fee, obviously, which is a guide fee by the musicians union. Sometimes it can be very, very high. But then individual musicians also has the liberty to decide on, I am happy to agree to this fee. We want this to happen, so that is also there. So musicians union would not point fingers to us if all the musicians agree together.
Sure.
So that's how it works here.
Okay. So YouTube and Facebook, everybody who's been putting out your videos and letting people, tabla players, mridangam players, since we're doing Mridangamela Fest, I think it's for everybody to be very careful of what are you negotiating, and that's something that's really, really important for everybody, because it's just not performing, camera, record, then that's it, gone. This is your wealth. This is what you're creating, which you've worked so hard for. So I think that's so important to keep that in mind. My only concern here was, Sandhya and Jataneel, when you're talking about, there is this end user license agreement that YouTube makes you. It's like a free for all sort of thing. That's why I wanted you guys to address, because there's very legal nuance there about how it can just become anybody's property because you let them. I don't even need to say it. It can just go into Anantha's page and it becomes Anantha's property. Is it so?
I don't think so. Maybe Sandhya can throw some light on this better.
Yeah, so when you're talking about the end user license agreement, it's just, it's the platform's way of kind of putting the onus on the person who is uploading the content to disclaim, or basically to affirm that he or she owns the copyright in that video or the content that they're putting it out there. So to kind of like avoid liability in a copyright infringement or like a potential piracy problem. And that is something which is being contested in like Europe and America on a large scale right now, so that YouTube can take on more responsibility in terms of the content that is being uploaded. So but
isn't there an authenticity verifier?
Yeah,
for some
so
of these things?
Because of the content ID. But the content ID But the content ID is also so the way it functions is has in fact led to a lot of conflict, because you have if you're taking in the context of Carnatic music alone. So I don't know if you remember, in 2014 or 15, there was a channel that got taken down, I think Parivartini. They had taken permission from the organizers of these Carnatic classical concerts and had uploaded videos of it on their channel. And these were rare concerts, like over a period of time. And they had all the necessary permissions to upload it. But because those songs have been released by labels, and labels were being notified of this as a copyright claim, there was sufficient, pressure on the channel to shut, and they had more than 3 strikes and the channel was taken down. So and obviously the idea that you can copyright a Carnatic song and that a label owns it is something which kind of put everybody in the community off. So,
I was exactly going to bring this, because what happened was the flip side of it, where there was this flautist who was playing live, YouTube live, and he played Raghupati Raghava on that, somebody requested, so he played, and a music label actually put a copyright claim on that. And he was shocked. He was like, how can you just put a copyright claim, because I'm actually making a rendition of it. And it's also important for musicians to know not to get scared. You can put a counter to send them an email and say that, no, it is mine, it's my rendition, and don't get threatened by these things also,
Exactly. So, but I think the common practice is also that when you have organizers who invite performers over and tell them that you can perform only from the catalog of these labels. So then there is no, copyright claim or strike that is imposed, which again is.
Yeah. Jataneel, in terms of royalties, when a YouTube, sorry, I'm just trying to finish this YouTube Facebook thing. Yeah.
Sure.
Let's say I have assigned XYZ YouTube channel. I've done a sound recording for them and it's on their YouTube channel. Can I do a contract where I can get royalty share of that streaming?
Yeah, why not?
Does PRS collect that, or do I have to register my work with PRS or any other royalty collection agency for that matter?
Yeah, so
I don't think PRS collects that royalty, right? It's a performance thing. So this would be like mechanical and performance, which would then come through the person you recorded it with.
No, but there has to be
your contribution is just audible as a performer, or you're a composer as well?
No, let's say I'm a Mridangam player. I played with Shubhaji and Anantha was also playing, and three of us performed. Somebody paid us money, and our concert is on somebody else's YouTube channel, right?
Yeah.
Now let's say we have agreed that we've taken money, given them NOC, and it's gone to their YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Can I? It could be a really popular channel. Can I have a royalty deal where, let's say, 10% comes to Anantha, me, and 20% goes to Shubhaji, whatever?
Yeah, you can. You can do a deal with the company or with the label, whoever it is, for the sound recording. So you can take part in the revenue share, depending upon whether they agree or not, obviously. But you can, in a sense, as a performer.
No, but the why I asked if there's anyone else who collects this on behalf is because
for sound recording, generally the societies, they're called neighboring rights society, they generally don't cover the online world because it's dealt directly by the sound recording owners via the distributors or directly, straightforward. There is one society which I'm aware of, Sound Exchange in USA, who would collect for online usages. So, previous two questions back when we were discussing about what happens in terms of exploitation of economic rights and all of that, I would suggest that performers should become members of societies like PPL, like Sound Exchange, so that whenever there is reports, usage reports that comes to them, and if any of your track has been reported, then you would receive royalty. And by being a member, you can actually go back as far back as 6 years to kind of collect your royalties.
6 years in retrospect.
Yeah.
But that, I'm assuming that is in the UK, because in India it's a 3-year retrospective application, and with IPRS only composers and lyricists and publishers can sign up. So as a performer you need to go to ISRA, and ISRA again focuses only on singers. So if you're a sessions artist, then there is no copyright society that takes care of you, unfortunately.
When are they going
UK?
I'm referring to the sound recording.
Sound recording, there's no copyright society in India right now that is registered. But PPL is an authorized agent right now. It's not recognized as a copyright society because they were hauled up in 2015. And once that audit came through, they lost their position as a registered copyright society because there was a lot of fraud that had happened. So right now they function as an authorized agent for a couple of the large labels. And you have Novex, which is again an authorized agent. But there is no copyright society recognized or a registered copyright society. Yeah.
Okay, I see. So I think as a performer, one can join PPL in the UK and also Sound Exchange in USA to collect the online royalties side of things. And I think that's something that every performer should do.
So in that case, it's also for the producers. All of them will make money on that, right? It's not just the accompanying artist. It's the producer, it's the artist. Everybody gets a little share of whatever that is.
Yeah, essentially.
Okay. Just making sure that they are also involved in this.
They have to ask for it, or does it naturally flow into them?
No, see, the way societies work, I think we didn't mention, so I work for PRS, Performing Rights Society, in addition to being the artistic director of Grand Philharmonic. So the way societies would function is every society is reactive. Okay, so as an owner, copyright owner, or if you're participating in receiving royalties on a copyright, you have to be proactive and make sure that the society is aware of your work. As long as they're aware of your work, they can then match with any usage that comes in with your work. Basically, if they don't have the information, they will not be able to match it. It's like that.
Yes.
So here's the other begging question: when are non-singers allowed to sign up for this organization in India?
ISRA?
Yeah.
No, that's singers.
Only
ISRA is
singers. Yeah.
only singer.
He's saying
Yeah.
Where's the protection? Yeah, when are non-singers allowed to sign up for something like that? That's a question.
When you have a copyright society for it. So the other hitch is that in the Copyright Act, you have only one copyright society that is allowed to be registered in each category. So, like, for example, you have one for performers, which is the ISRA. But unfortunately, ISRA limits itself to only singers. You have one copyright society registered under the composers and lyricists category, and that's it. But unlike the US, where you have multiple copyright societies operating in the same sphere, which gives people the option of picking the copyright society that suits them the best. So right now, from what I understand, there is a conversation that is going on between like large industry stakeholders, players who kind of want to explore the option of setting up more copyright societies and not just limiting it to IPRS or ISRA, but have the option of establishing multiple copyright societies. So you have people from different parts or different sectors kind of joining in. Like, I mean, if you're looking at it purely from in terms of like how IPRS works, it's very film industry heavy. So if you had the indie side of the scene, or like the indie scene, technically they want a copyright society that is more representative of their interests. So if the law is amended to provide for it, then that is something which can be considered. But
And
now
that will be a very confusing situation for the market.
Shubhaji?
I had a question for all of you. Don't you think that this whole idea of so many societies is really redundant in today's day and age, when you can register, let us say, as independent artists, our work is put online by aggregators with whom we sign up and pay a fee for uploading our album to be made available on, let's say, 300, 400 online stores. And we are able to see, we can log into our account and we can see who bought our album and what they paid for it, and the money comes directly to my bank. In that sense, don't you think it would be a good idea to do away with all these societies, which are in any case controlled by the more powerful record labels, at least in India? I mean, when is a record label going to be bothered about the artist who is performing, let's say, Qawwali or Kirtan at a small temple shrine and selling music in the stores that are outside there? Why are they going to bother about them when they are actually, I think there's a conflict of interest when in the same society, in the same publishing society and collecting society, when you have such mega, sort of, these are the kingmakers and these are the people who control the market. How on earth are they going to be, why would they keep the interest of the artist in mind when administering? I don't think it's
Jataneel,
possible.
you want to take that question?
There's a
representing
actually, I would really want to take that question after Jataneel, please.
No, please, Sandhya, I want to hear you. I want to hear you.
No, so
Really?
I think from the Indian perspective, how copyright societies have worked has been abysmal, primarily because of the unique situation that we have, having a separate independent music industry that survives within the film industry. So ownership of content has been controlled by larger corporates, and it's not artist centric at all, as opposed to any of the so-called developed economies where the copyright societies actually function. And more importantly, because without the copyright societies, there are a chunk of royalties that you're missing out on. Because as an artist, what you mentioned about having your music distributed on online platforms, that is just one aspect of it, of you owning the sound recording. But on the publishing side of things, or as the owner of the composition, there is no real platform that tracks it today. The only way you can track it is through a performance society, a copyright society. And more importantly, if you're looking at live performances, people who are playing your music at a venue or at a mall, there is no way that an artist can actually track it. So that way a copyright society comes into play. But of course, in India, the way they have maintained those logs is laughable. We've already discussed that. It's very different outside. They people are very regular with submission of cue sheets and getting licenses, appropriate licenses that are valued and assessed as per like a proper formula and not just some weighted average method which is used here. So
Yeah.
Jataneel.
So then if I were to perform Iraq Yaman, let us say, in UK at a concert and also in, let's say, Bangalore at a concert, then what kind of what kind of royalties would come to me? Because I'm performing music with Rag Yaman, which was not mine in the first place.
Exactly.
Let us assume that a composition, I think this is also something that we need to consider, whether or not to become members. Is it really going to help us? People who are doing, yeah.
So I think, Shubhaji, there is also a distinction in the kind in which genre of music that you're specializing in. So if obviously, like in classical music, the whole concept of owning a composition doesn't really arise. So yes, like you mentioned, having a copyright society or registering with a copyright society doesn't really make sense unless you own the sound recording of the music that you're putting out. So, but unfortunately in India, you don't have a copyright society that functions for the sound recording side of it. You could register with a PPL in UK and have them cover you from as a copyright society dealing with sound recordings. But as a composition, since you're playing or since you're performing classical music or traditional music, which typically falls into public domain, there is no ownership of composition. You can't really claim publishing royalties on that front.
No, but there are new compositions that are also being made, and they have always been. So, for example, all of us are composing. Many artists, younger musicians are also composing, and not just composing in some sort of blank space. They're publishing those in the form of books and CDs, or very often books with accompanying CDs. So we do have that system of publishing where new rags and new compositions in existing rags have also been made. And I think those discussions are also important on how to
segregate.
Does PRS take us into account, Jataneel, when you're doing rag, when, like Shubhaji said, if she does Rag Yaman and she's done a performance, basically it's a classical performance. How does UK deal with this?
So I think again, it's a very kind of simplified form to understand. I'll just address that first and I'll go back to something. So if you are performing in Rag Yaman, the bandish, is that your composition? That's your composition. So if it is your composition, then yes, whoever the promoter is, when they are going to report to PRS about the concert, they will pay a certain percentage of the box office, which will come back to you. So that's how it will work. Now, the challenge that I have had several number of times, actually millions of times, where the promoters of Indian classical concerts would say, well, we don't need to pay any PRS license because these are all traditional performances. These are all out of copyright public domain work. So my question always had been, like, whoever is performing, can you double check from them that the bandish that they're performing it can be in Yaman or it can be in any rag, but is the bandish a new composition? People do have compositions, but they don't have normally answers to this. So I think the performers can, contribute in making sure that the promoter is aware that yes, it is in this rag, but the composition is mine, and this needs to be, paid. The license needs to be paid for it. I think that's one
But
Yes.
that will happen only if the composition registered with the society.
Well,
No,
I think,
and also,
yeah,
Sure,
yeah. नहीं, बोलिए.
Nick, I was saying that I think there is some ownership to an improvisation also, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, what about a tabla
That was
solo?
my point earlier.
Our music is in any case improvised. So even if I'm performing Rag Yaman, it is an improvisation. I mean, not perhaps
Your
improvisation.
interpretation of
Yes, and it's an interpretation of Rag Yaman.
Lots of melodies.
Yeah, and I think perhaps this idea of how to acknowledge and also bring improvised music into this fold of the music business perhaps needs to be also
Yeah,
looked at.
I think
there are
this is
two
a
things,
topic.
Shubhaji. One is if you're simply performing a rag, like delineating a rag in your own style or way, then there is no question of unless it is recorded and then distributed. Then of course the copyright angle comes in. Otherwise, but if it is a composition that you own in a particular rag, and then if someone is you're performing it, then of course royalties will accrue to you. So I think they're two different things. If it's
I think if in the sum
way of presenting a rag, then I don't think that is just everything in classical music is like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
So unless it
Yes,
is
I can sum up
recorded-
what you asked about a royalty collection body being there. I think it's important that there is a central body monitoring these things, because otherwise it's very difficult, to monitor. So in terms of monitoring and distributing, I think for me personally it has worked very well. Where you create a composition and idea is to register. Once you register and the data matches, they're very easily able to distribute the royalties to you. So this also brings me to the next thing, which is the fact that we have collection bodies and all that. That's one thing. Now we are talking about classical musicians. As like you said, I'm singing Rag Yaman, I can improvise. Similarly, a tabla player, a mridangam player is also improvising.
Absolutely.
So in that sense, can we use the word collaborators for mridangam players and tabla players or sarangi players, that they're actually collaborating with the artist? So there are three collaborators, and I'm going to split this into two, because there is an idea of collaboration in the Indian classical system, which is embedded by nature of what we do, which is improvising on what somebody composed 300 years ago or 3 days before. Everybody sort of comes and just plays. And in the Western classical domain, that's slightly different, because you can have two people coming and collaborating and writing music for everybody else. Till now, I don't know if Anantha, I'm sure he'll throw the paper if somebody writes a Mridangam part for him and gives in a Carnatic Kacheri. So yeah, what is
I'm waiting.
what do you think about this, Shubhaji? Whether should this conversation start, that musicians should be called in the classical domain, at least, even if you don't call them, that the title of collaborator should be there with them?
Why not? Absolutely. I mean, in terms of how they are actually addressed, they are called Sangat Kalakar. So they are, I mean, the artist who sort of perhaps taking center stage is actually setting, for example, there is no BPM that is given to us, right? We start a composition. I mean, it would be difficult to pin down the exact BPM on which we would start every bandish. So we set the pace in that sense, the person who's sort of considered center stage, and then the accompanying artists bring their ideas. Their contribution is by no means, very little or insignificant. It is a very significant contribution.
Right.
Unless you want to sing, let's say, with just an app, then you put on the app and you don't want live intervention at all. Then of course it's a different situation. But otherwise, I would imagine that the contribution of accompanying artists is stellar and very significant, and I would have no issues in treating them as collaborators.
In fact, since we're at it, when we were doing a bit of, in Mridangam tradition, when they started, right, they couldn't tune the instrument to various degrees. So in the earlier, recorded sort of information that's there, apparently the singer used to sing on the Mridanga player's key. So it was actually the other way around. They didn't have to tune to the singer's key. They had to. It was the exact opposite.
Very
so yeah, I mean,
Vivek, I'll tell you something. Like when I was studying and in my orchestration lessons, we were first taught the limitations of the instrument because when you are going to write for violin, you need to make sure that your melody is within the range, because you cannot go outside or beyond.
Right.
So, and it applies for every orchestral instrument. So it's very much easy to understand that a piano will have 88 keys and it will have such a massive range, but probably flute will not sit somewhere in the top register or somewhere. So as a singer, I'm thinking piano and singer a similar thing, which is they have got a better kind of range in that sense. And based on what the instrument's pitch is, probably they'll match. So
yeah, but now with MIDI, every instrument is played in every octave.
Well, also, there's something that came to my mind when I was, listening to what Shubhaji was saying and what you were talking about collaborators. Orchestra has different sections. So string section, woodwind section, brass section, percussion section, and we can have a choir as well. And sometimes we have, say, in case of concertos, we will have either a single instrument or a singer or multiple instruments, to be honest, which is kind of the main. And then the accompanying is done by the orchestra, the entire orchestra. So I'm just thinking in a Indian classical ensemble, there is voice, which is the vocal section. Then there is the percussion section. And then there will be some accompanying melodic section, probably with a harmonium or sarangi or something of that kind. And in case of Carnatic, there is violin there. I think we can look at it like different sections, although it is just 1 or 2% in that section.
Sure.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think nomenclature would make a lot of difference. I think just appreciating that these are not just mere accompanying musicians who you have at your beck and call and use them as you wish, but as someone who truly contributes to the experience of music. I think the minute you change the nomenclature, a lot of other things might also fall into place.
Yeah, sometimes I wondered, is it
accompanying musicians will start feeling a little bit more confident about even expressing their rights, because you're not called an accompanying musician anymore. You're a co-collaborator.
Right.
Well, there's two things there. One, any accompanying musician also can become a soloist. So it's almost like there are two sides of the way their musicality can be technically copyrighted in a musical environment. One a stimulus and one reaction to that. So that's definitely food for thought. Sorry, Vivek, you were going to say something and then I cut you off.
No, that's fine. That's fine. No, I was just saying that this session, I think, was, if I may use the word, we felt passionately about this also because I think in a country like India, where currently so many musicians are actually in really troubled times, right? I've actually seen charity as a last resort. I sometimes wonder if these systems are actually, could be even now, if people can start this system, even at a small percentage, I can, I'm happy to say that in the last few months, I actually survived in some portion of royalty that I got, which I did some 4-5 years back, 6 years back. As a Mridangam player, I don't think I've had anybody call me for a recording or a session. Either they thought I'm too scary to get an NOC from, or whatever the reason may be. But I actually survived because of this. And I think accompanying artists or collaborators should also take note of this. And I think in all this, it's a conversation starter. I keep saying this, that this is not about waking up tomorrow morning and sending notices to your producers, saying, hey, you didn't pay me that, hey, you didn't pay me this, or you took me for a ride. It's I've actually gone to the extent of telling people that at least put those categories in your invoice, head it, let it be there. Even if you don't charge for them, let it be a conversation saying you are rightfully allowed to say these things. There is a reason why I'm mentioning that. There is a reason why, why there is an invoice, there is a contract. At least mention it, have that conversation. Maybe 6 months down the line, a year down the line, 5 years down the line, this system might change. But if you don't start the conversation today, especially in these times, because I can't tell you how difficult it is especially for accompanying artists, because they're all waiting to be called. When is my main artist going to call me for a recording? So I think these are times where it's really important to discuss these things and have this conversation about all these rights and royalties in this social media era where everything just goes up in 30 seconds. Nobody really cares and values what they're putting out. So yeah, I mean, anything else that you guys would like to sort of throw light in, it'll be much appreciated. Shubhaji?
Thank you. I think we've covered quite a bit of ground, and maybe we can have another session sometime later to take these things forward when we get some feedback also.
Superb. Aishwarya?
I mean, from someone who represents the artist fraternity, I just want to say, please seek legal counsel. Please be aware of your rights. And maybe people like Sandhya or a bunch of lawyers, if you can draw up this, there can be a resource that you can point these people to where they, in a very simplified form, they at least made aware of what they rightfully own and what they can give away and what they need not give away. And you might have artist managers, but even we only have limited access to this information as well. We have not studied the law. It's also a lot of what we pick up by experience. So for those of you who can't afford it, I would urge the legal fraternity to maybe put out something in form of an open resource where you can, where these musicians can access this information.
Yeah, I was actually going to put Sandhya on the spot with this, because with the Music Composers Association, we actually managed to draft a basic contract for the advertising fraternity as well, so that they could just, you can add, subtract, whatever, but just like I said, a hygiene of things to look at. So they actually started putting it in their contracts as well. Even after that, if they don't do it, then that's their problem. But I think it'll be nice if there could be just pointers, like I said, to sort of look into when artists are giving away or recording their contracts.
And another thing for artists, I just want to add here, whether it's the artist doing the talking or someone on your behalf doing the talking, I think the minute you start talking legalities, people immediately clamp. They get very scared and intimidated. So maybe we need to find a way of having these conversations in that are, in very friendly terms. It is not. I often tell people, you're signing a contract. It's not because I don't trust you. It's only because we just want to be clear on what we've agreed on. It is as much to protect you as much as it is to protect ourselves or my artist. So don't feel intimidated, or maybe even devise a way of talking. I think it's an art we all have to learn. And I'm not saying I'm good at it. I'm often known as someone who's, it's, you better be beware of this woman. She's just going to start pulling out nitty-gritties in every line that you see in a contract. So I think that's something I have to work on, and artists should as well.
Which is just to let you know that we have contracts, model contracts available for download on our site www.underscorerecords.com, and they've been there for a long time. I don't know how many.
Put that right away. 1 minute.
So
load that in.
Anybody can download them and customize them as well for their own particular use. And these were put up many years ago.
Sorry, what is it again?
Underscorerecords.com.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm struggling with this.
We'll just put it in the comments later. No problem.
Underscore done.
And they're there for recording as well as for live performances, also for accompanying artists. So, but I don't know how many people have used them. However, we've had them there for decades now.
I did not know that. That is wonderful.
Thank you so much.
There you go.
We'll keep doing this. Jataneel.
Yeah, I think for me, I always think that as a performer or as a creator, one must plug oneself into the whole pool of money that is flowing. So it's like your municipality connection of water, right? Until and unless you have the connection, ये नल खोलने पर भी पानी नहीं निकलने वाला है, So So it's important that you plug yourself in as a composer with societies like IPRS, PRS, so that they are able to collect on your behalf. PPL or Sound Exchange as a performer, so that they can collect, and and keep letting them know what you're doing in terms of registering the works and all of that, because that will really be useful. That's what I would say.
Sandhya ji?
No, I think for me it's been like a real learning curve in the last 5 years. I just getting people to get comfortable with a lawyer and say that, okay, I'm not going to complicate things for you, and I'm actually here to help you out. So I think I guess the biggest hurdle has been expense, in terms of not having if you can get a lawyer, it could, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a good lawyer. But I think like Shubhaji mentioned, having a code or like some kind of checklist is great, and that's something which we are actually working on. I don't know if you've heard of Indie Music Allies, and I've been conducting workshops for like musicians, targeting musicians and artist managers, just to make them understand the basics of how copyrights work and what are the things that they need to look out for in a contract. And obviously I'm just one person and I realize this is a lonely space primarily because it doesn't pay too much, but it's something which I'm passionate about.
Just widen the spectrum of indie music, because all Hindustani and Carnatic classical and folk musicians.
You're going to get a bunch of Mridangam players knocking at your door soon.
I'm more than happy. Because and I realize it's a massively underrepresented community, like in total, musicians in general. You do have lawyers in the entertainment field, but they're all again very film industry heavy.
Yes.
So it's a fairly lonely space, but there are a bunch of us who are trying to
Don't worry, we'll join you.
Make some change.
I have to tell one thing to all the artist fraternity, because I because I'm an artist, I can also sometimes speak for them. Is a lot of people think that when you say hire a lawyer means you're going to go to court. So first thing is, it's not that.
It's not that.
You're just there. You can just consult. Nobody's going to court. Nobody's doing any such thing. So it's just to take advice, and there's no harm. And I'm sure there is Aishwarya Natarajan here, Indianuance. I'm sure you can write to her as well. There's Jataneel, who's a member of PRS. I'm sure you can write to him as well to get any of this information. For Mridangam playing, you can call Anantha and me, and we'll join you for any of that. Yes, Anantha.
I think no. This is a fabulous. I mean, for one side, being a performer, I think this has been extremely enlightening to know that these things are in one's rights, and it's a question of figuring out when to start that conversation for yourself, and it's different for every person in every stage of their life as a creative person. But I think just as a curve of ways to go, this kind of transparency and this kind of it starts from intent, like we mentioned, the intention to actually acknowledge, credit, and also be on the other side of it saying, this is mine, is something that slowly we can probably move towards to say that these are all good hygienes to practice. And so I think on that note, if it's okay with everybody else, I personally want to thank all of you for your time. This has been extremely, revealing in the best way possible. And for all of the people who tuned in, thank you. And
do we have your NOC to keep it on Facebook after this gets over?
Good one.
Yeah.
Verbal NOC.
Yes.
Verbal NOC.
So, thank you, everyone. Yes, it's the Smita Jain was saying, I'm just going to quickly address a few last questions here. Shashankji said, I often get these messages and claims when I play Rag. I think you can just write back to them saying, it's none of your business. I have played it. It's my composition or my rendition. You can definitely question it. Smita Jain, yes, it will be there. It's helpful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, people.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
For this beautiful.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.